If your paper keeps getting rejected only for the journal to provide zero feedback on how to improve it, then you've clicked on the right video. In this video, I'm going to show you behind the scenes of my own 3-pillar submission strategy that helped me publish 15 papers from my PhD and avoid the dreaded rejection loop. We're going to look at journal selection, visuals, and most important of all, framing. And by the end, you're going to know exactly why you keep getting rejected and how to fix it. Most professors will tell you that it's the reviewers that decide whether you get published or not. But that's not actually true, because there's a large component of that decision that you have control over if you do it the right way. The first paper that I ever published took me 2 years from the day of submission to the day of publication. The reason it took me that long is because the reviewers made me rewrite basically everything in the paper. So much so that by the end, you wouldn't even recognize it as the same research. The problem was it was an invited paper in a special issue on ecological networks. And although my paper did deal with ecological networks, it wasn't really about that topic. And so I had to mold this paper into something that it ultimately wasn't. That is the first mistake, a topical mismatch. And it's a surefire way to get rejected over and over again. I mean, just think of it like this. You could write the greatest rock hit of all time, but if you submit it to a country label, it's just not going to land. Well, it's exactly the same when you submit your paper to a journal that it really just doesn't belong in. So here's how you identify the right journal to submit to and avoid wasting months on submission bounce backs. Your ideal journal fits at the intersection of these 3 things: topic, target audience, and the scope of the journal. If those 3 things don't align, then it doesn't matter how polished your paper is, it's just not going to land. For example, your paper's topic might appeal to a particular audience, but if the topic or the audience don't fit within the journal scope, then the editor's just going to reject it. Likewise, if the topic isn't within the journal's scope or the target audience isn't within the journal's readership, then it's just going to flop. But what if you've got a list of ideal journals and they vary by impact factor? Well, you still need to avoid the second mistake, and that is a target aim mismatch. There's a lot of terrible advice out there telling you to ignore impact factor, but at the end of the day, you need some way of gauging the journal's ranking. The simplest way to think about impact factor is the average number of citations that a paper in that journal gets every year. Measuring journals like this, you'll find that most are low tier, fewer are mid tier, and even fewer again are high tier. And sending your paper to the wrong part of this hierarchy of journals is kind of like applying for a senior level position when you have no experience. It's not that you've not done any great work, it's just that it's not groundbreaking. And well, that's fine. You can't be publishing groundbreaking research every single time you publish. But it's also possible that you do belong in a high tier journal. It's just that your figures aren't doing the heavy lifting that they should be. And so next, we're going to talk about how to create convincing visuals that sell your story to the reader. When you clicked on this video, you arrived with certain expectations about what you thought I was going to cover based on the thumbnail and the title. Well, the exact same thing happens when an editor picks up your paper to review. The reader looks at your research questions and forms expectations about how the figures are going to look. And if they turn the page and the figures look nothing like they expected, then now they're confused and annoyed, and they're not on your side. So this is how you check whether your figures meet the reader expectations and avoid getting rejected for, well, shit figures. Give your paper's title, abstract, and cover letter to a colleague and ask them to draw or describe how they expect the figures to look like based on everything that they've read. Take a look at what they hand you and what you've got in your paper, and if those 2 things are not aligned, then you at least have some clue as to why you keep getting rejected. But before you go changing the figures, we need to make sure that your paper is framed correctly. Now, this is by far the most important step, and it's the most common reason for rejection. There are 2 parts to framing that get your paper rejected. The first relates to your problem statement. Many researchers wrongly think of papers as reports. I went in with these hypotheses, I tested them, and these are the results I found. Here I am to report the figures. But that completely misses the why you did what you did. And it's the why in your research that makes it valuable. So this is how to clearly highlight the value in your research so that editors become fans, not foes. Firstly, your paper must state the problem that it attempts to solve or the knowledge gap that it attempts to fill. And you've got to do this early. You should do this at least in the abstract, in the introduction, and ideally also in the cover letter. This is the crux of your paper, and so many people miss this point, or at least do a bad job of explaining it. Next, you need to highlight the novel contribution that your paper makes. Now, your novel contribution could be that you solved the problem, or it could just be that you've used a method and approach that nobody else has used before. In either case, state this explicitly. This is particularly important in the cover letter, where you need to convince the editor that your research is worth publishing in their journal and that it's going to be cited at least as many times as their impact factor. But if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, my paper doesn't make any of these mistakes and it still got rejected, well, there's probably deeper structural issues going on. Or maybe you've got a manuscript draft that feels more like a collection of parts than an actual story. Either way, bring it to my live workshop at the end of this month. We'll diagnose exactly what's going wrong and we'll craft a publication-ready rewrite plan. But before you go resubmitting that paper, everything that we've just covered will be in vain if you don't submit it with a convincing cover letter. So make sure you watch this video to copy my foolproof cover letter template that editors love.